Hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar this afternoon, Australian time. Welcome to everybody that's joining us today, including our international guests who are joining us for this important webinar, which looks at the future skills demands as we start to move forward in a greening economy, not only here in Australia, but globally. Before we get underway, I'd just like to make an acknowledgement of country. So in the spirit of reconciliation, the Career Industry Council of Australia would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connection to land, sea and community. I'd like to acknowledge that this afternoon I'm presenting this webinar on the lands of the Wadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. I'd like to extend my respect to any elders past and present, and extend that respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander peoples who are joining us in the webinar today. Just a tiny little bit of housekeeping, just to let you know this session is being recorded. If you do experience any technical issues over the course of the next hour, we'd ask you please in the first instance, just to try refreshing your screen. If that doesn't work, you can log out and come back in with the link that you have been provided. We will have the chat function open today. Please feel free to add your comments or any contribution to the chat throughout the course of the hour. If you do have any specific questions for our presenters, we would ask you please to put those into the Q&A button. It just allows us to be able to facilitate those questions easier than if they've been put into the chat. We have one final webinar left in the international webinar series this year. On the 29th of November, we have a webinar with David Strauser from the University of Illinois talking about career development for people with disabilities. So if you're interested in attending that webinar, please visit the Seeker website, click on the events tab, and you will be able to follow the links to register for that event. So it gives me an opportunity now to welcome both Zana and Lena to our international webinar series today. Zana is a labour market economist at the Director of Labour, Employment and Social Affairs at the OECD. She joined the skills team in 2021, and it's great to have her back. She presented a webinar for us last year on mid-career, so it's great to have her back. Her work focuses on the analysis of adult training policies and labour market trends, with a particular attention to career guidance and the recognition of prior learning. And over the last period, she's obviously been looking at green skills and the skills required for the labour market as we start to move into transitioning. So it's great to have her back. And she's joined today. We're joined also today by Lena, who works at the Swedish Public Employment Service. She's worked there for just short of 20 years, mainly as the first line officer with direct contact with job seekers. Since last November, however, she has worked for a particular office that focuses on labour and skills demand associated with the large green industrial investments being made in the north of Sweden and the societal transformations within the surrounding region. So it's great to have both of our presenters with us today, and I am going to throw to Zana to kick us off.
Thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me back to speak. I am very excited to present our latest report, which is on the green transition. And so my name is Jana, and I'm an economist with the skills team, where we look at how megatrends are affecting the labor market and the supply and demand for skills. And in the last year and a half, we've had an increased focus on the green transition. And in September this year, we launched the report on assessing and anticipating skills for the green transitions. And I thought I would take you through some of the findings there and how they might relate to career guidance. So to start us off, I think we're all aware that the climate crisis is very urgent. This year in 2023, we saw some of the hottest months recorded in the history, and both Australia and Southern Europe and Northern America were affected by wildfires like they never have before. So this is definitely the momentum to act, and we know that things are happening in the space. There's new legislation coming out. There are more investments into green energy. There are agreements happening. Here in Europe, we have the Fit for 55, which is about reducing greenhouse emission by 55%. So changes are happening. And we know that this is going to have an impact on employment. Most estimates say that the overall employment effect will only be moderate, but we do know that what's likely to happen is a big shift in employment from low emission industries, from high emission industries into low emission industries, which will require a huge shift of people, of workers, that are going to have to change jobs, are going to potentially change industries. And with that, they probably will have to change their skill set or adjust their skill sets to work in the new jobs and in the new industries. So this is an area where we focus our attention, and where we hope that policymakers are also going to invest more attention in ensuring that these job transitions are smooth and are happening, so that the green transition can happen. We do know that people are aware of the importance of skills, that we need to have the right skills in order to transition into those green jobs. And here's just a selection of some of the newspaper headlines only in the last year. And the risk here is that not having the right skills could be one of the bigger barriers facing the green transition. And from a study that was done by LinkedIn, for instance, we see that the growth in vacancies that require green skills, so online job vacancies that require green skills, that growth is double that of the growth of people on LinkedIn with green skills. So what we have here is the risk that the demand for specific skills for the green transition outpaces the supply of these skills, causing a skill gap and a slowing down of the green transition, which we do not want to happen. So that is where this project comes in. And in order to talk about the report, we also need to go through some concepts. Most importantly, what is a skill assessment and anticipation exercise? Now, a skill assessment and anticipation exercise, which is also called an SAA, are studies that generate information about skill supply and skill demand. And SAAs don't just have to be for the green transition. My team, for instance, has been working on skills assessments for the past few years in relation to general skills needs, but also skills needs in the healthcare sector, for instance. And then this project was, the aim was to look at how can we use this tool, which is a skills assessment and anticipation, to identify the skill gaps for the green transition and identify policies that could help bridge that gap. So because evidence on skills changes can facilitate the design of upskilling and reskilling efforts and policies to help support the relocation of workers across sectors and across occupations. So to give you a little bit more information about the project, so this project started about 1.5 years ago, and it was a research project that analyzed in depth how skills assessment and anticipation works in 5 countries, which are Australia, Austria, France, and Norway and Sweden, where we really went in depth to look at the different initiatives in mapping the skills gap and implementing policies. But we also looked at approaches from other OECD countries and private organizations as well. The goal was really to identify key skills assessments and follow their life cycle in order to identify what are the success points to create a study that yields useful results and then translate those results into action. So what I'm going to present to you today is it's two parts. So the first part is some of the findings we had about what is it about SAAs for the green transition that are important to consider when doing a study and trying to measure skills gap in the green transition, and what are the mechanisms that allow or don't allow policy action to be made on the basis of these findings. So if we start off with the more about the design. Oh yeah, and this resulted in the report, which follows the life cycle and also guidelines for policymakers who might want to try such an initiative themselves. So that will be available. So now let's start with the findings. Probably the most important finding, which was also the hardest to wrap our head around when we started, was the importance of definitions, particularly when it comes to the green transition. Because the goal of an SAA is to identify skills gap, but then there's no internationally agreed upon definition of the green transition or of green occupations or of green skills. And so those who are carrying out the studies had to define these things themselves. And it turns out that the definition that you choose ends up having a big impact on your results and also how the results can be used for policymaking. Broadly speaking, there are three types of definitions that can be used for the green transition. And some of the studies went with what we call the industry definition, which is when you identify certain key industries or sectors that are important for the green transition, and then you go into a deep dive of those industries or sectors to try and identify what are the growths in occupations or the decline in occupations, and what are the skills that are necessary within those industries. This is, for instance, the way that they do it in Canada at the Future Skills Center, where they identify certain green industries and high emission industries and try and map the difference between those. When you choose a method like this, you run the risk of including analysis on occupations that are not necessarily green, because within the green sector, you can have green jobs, but you can also have jobs like a receptionist at a renewable energy company, which is not necessarily a green job in and of itself. However, it does let you, it does unlock information that is needed to boost a whole industry. The second definition that one can use is occupation, where you try and look at occupations across industries and identify which ones are going to be in high demand and which ones are going to be in low demand on the basis of the green transition. This is, for instance, what they do in Sweden at the Public Employment Service, which I'm sure Lena is going to tell us more about, so I won't spoil anything there. And then the third approach is what we call the skills approach, which is a very difficult approach to do because it involves identifying specific green tasks within occupations and then try and estimate what are the skills that are needed to carry out those green tasks. This often requires you to have a sort of taxonomy of tasks and skills, which is, for instance, what we're doing in Europe with ESCO, which is the classification of skills, competencies, occupations, and qualifications, where they really go in depth at mapping each and every occupation and task within occupations, and then identifying the green tasks there. So all of these definitions yield different type of results, and we will come back to how this affects policymaking. It's also worth mentioning the methods play an important role here, because once an institution has chosen which definition they want, it they also then have to choose the method. And broadly speaking, there are two sets of methods for estimating skills needs. There is quantitative methods that use data such as labor market statistics and labor force or employer surveys, and they produce econometric projections. And what is good about these is that they can take into account that the move towards a cleaner economy will increase demand for certain occupations and sectors and reduce demand in others. Then we also have qualitative methods, which use inputs from experts or stakeholders. These are often collected through interviews, surveys, and workshops, and can be really good for tapping into what the experts think are the effects of the green transition. When reviewing skills assessments, we often find that using a combination of quantitative and qualitative methods is generally viewed as best practice. However, this is it's very resource intensive. And in general, when we've carried out other studies on other topics that are not the green transition, we find that they're not used as much. A mixed method approach is not used as much because it's so resource intensive. However, for the green transition, this is actually used more than other methods. A possible explanation is that the people carrying out these studies need to take into account a lot of different uncertainties that are very unique for the green transition. And that could be a reason why. And then we go on to the scope of these exercises, which is again influenced by the definitions chosen and the methods chosen. And within the scope, we think that there's three important considerations to be made, which are time horizon, geography, and coverage. These affect, again, the type of results that you can get and then how you can use them in policy. And considerations include whether or not you're going to look at the skills needs and supply now or make forecasts into the future, whether or not you're able to extract local and regional data for local and regional implementation, and whether or not the results apply to the whole of the economy or just one industry. So those were some of the findings that we had about the design of an SAA study. And now I would like to take you on to how to implement these results and what we found there when it comes to the green transition. In general, evidence on skills can be used in policymaking within 6 broad categories, which you see here, and that's adult training, formal education, career guidance, employment policies, industrial policies, and migration policies. And I think for the purpose of this webinar today, it will be most interesting to look at the first 3, which is what we would traditionally call skills policies, because they deal with topics such as upskilling and reskilling and job transitions, which really bore down to the need for skills. And so I'm just quickly going to take you through some of these. For instance, in formal education, what you can do with this results is you can update qualifications and curricula, you can determine study places, and you can develop apprenticeship programs. In our review, for instance, in Australia, the results of the Clean Energy Capacity Study has been used to develop apprenticeship programs. Within adult learning, you can revise course content, allocate funding to training providers, design training incentive for workers, which are usually financial incentives in some form, and train the trainer. Within adult learning, we have a really good example in a report from France, where an institution decided to map what are the skills need within the same green occupation across different regions, and then map it against what kind of training was available in each one of those regions to see if the training available was was adapted for the local needs of that green occupation. a very fascinating approach, in my opinion. And then career guidance, which is what we're interested here. So within career guidance, there's two ways in which results about skills for the green transition can affect career guidance. The first one is to update career guidance services, which essentially means that career guidance advisors, or those who provide guidance services, receive information about green jobs or green industries or declining industries, and what are the specific skills needs within those occupations, so that they can adjust the type of support and guidance that they give to their clients. And then the second way that that SEAs can affect career guidance is disseminating labor market intelligence, which means identifying that there are certain programs for the green transition that are likely to be more successful if there is a career guidance component. So like I mentioned in Australia with the clean energy apprenticeship, they have a career guidance component because they decided that it was not sufficient to just create the apprenticeship programs and hope that people will flock to them. It's also about giving people the information and the support they need to take up these apprenticeship and then be successful in them, and then stay within that industry and work within that industry, which is so key for the green transition. When we were doing this review, we found that unfortunately, the use of skills intelligence in policymaking for the green transition remains limited, much more so than for other topics. So when trying to look at why this could be the case, we found these 5 barriers to using skills intelligence in policymaking. And I'm just going to take you through a few of them, but I think the most important one to keep in mind is that these studies are quite novel. Our project lasted for 1.5 years, and within those 1.5 years, I'd say there was about a doubling of the number of studies that we reviewed from when we started to when we ended, because so many had been completed within that 1.5 years that the project took place. The one in Australia that I've referenced only launched in October this year. So obviously it takes some time for this information to be translated into action. We also find that this issue of definitions and methods make it very hard to, because so many studies have different definitions, they have different methods, it makes it difficult to replicate studies and extract information on skills that can be compared across different studies, which makes it also harder to incorporate it into training design. We know that governance of green policies is very complex. Very few countries have a ministry of green transition to oversee all this work. So we're seeing more and more new types of institutions emerging to try and help the management and the flow of information and decision making within this field. And there's also issues of competing political challenges, and that implementation often takes place locally while this information is gathered at a more central level. So ensuring that the information reaches those who can enact change and enact policies sometimes does not happen. We do have some success stories, though, that we've identified that I think are very key for understanding the mechanism of translating evidence to practice. I've chosen these ones because they apply to career guidance. And what we see, for instance, is that the findings on skills analysis can be used to guide adults towards green occupations. And I know Lena will cover some of the ways that they try and guide people into these jobs. But we also see that by identifying the skills of each job or each sector and mapping them up against where people are like the jobs that they are transitioning from and the jobs that they're transitioning into can really help create targeted training needs and targeted guidance needs, because you know exactly where the person is coming from and where they are going. An example is the Future Skills Center, where guidance advisors play a big role, because the people who are leaving high emission sectors are often leaving high paying jobs, or they're more senior and they're going into a green industry where they might not be as senior. And so they need guidance to help them adapt to a new work reality. We also see that extracting information about skills needs also help to implement programs on skills development for the green transition. And I've already mentioned this about how in Australia with the apprenticeship programs, guidance is a key role, because they're trying to make the green transition more egalitarian and ensuring that underrepresented groups have the support that they need in order to succeed in the green transition. So that was what I wanted to cover today, and I would like to thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions about the report, feel free to put it in the Q&A or contact me after the webinar.
Thanks, Susanna, for that. That was great. Sorry, I thought you were going to throw to Lena, but I'll do that. I'll do that.
Yes, sorry.
Look, it's great today that we've also been able to bring to this webinar an example where things are happening on the ground, and where career guidance does play a part. And so I am going to welcome Lena now from the Swedish Employment Service to talk about what's happening with their programs in northern Sweden. And I'm going to share her slides. So I'm just going to introduce you, Lena, and then I'll bring your slides up. So welcome. Are you just on mute, Lena?
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Perfect.
Perfect. Thank you. I was just saying that Swedish PES and Zoom meetings do not agree with each other, so therefore I needed some help with sharing my presentation. My name is Lena Aldred, and I've been working, as David said earlier, at the Swedish PES for almost 20 years. But tomorrow I celebrate 1 year at the new office that's called Arbetsförmedlingen Kom Norr, which means PES Kom North. I'm going to talk a bit more about that later. And I'm going to just give you a short presentation about what we do up in the north, and how we're dealing with the green transition and the societal transformation that comes with the green transition. So if you can change for the next slide, please. I'm going to start with some statements. The skills supply in the north of Sweden is a key factor for a greener tomorrow, and it concerns the whole of Sweden, not just the region, the northern region. And also the industrial green revolution in the north leads to societal transformation, which I'm going to talk a bit more about later. And also that we're no longer talking about shortage of key skills. We're talking about shortage of people. There's about 500,000 people living in the region where I work, and we're going to need about 100,000 people moving in to work to cover the shortage that we have. So we need everyone. So you can change for the next slide, please. You might wonder why it's happening in the north of Sweden. I put a map up because not everyone knows the geography of Sweden. You can see Stockholm there, quite far south. I sit in Skellefteå, which is the most southern of the 5 cities that we operate in. And that's where Northvolt is located. You might have heard of the massive battery factory that we have in my town. And then we're also operating in 4 other it's hard to say cities because they're not very big. Towns, they will be big by the end of this, but at the moment I would say they're small cities or towns. So we have Luleå and Boden, which is quite near the coast, and then we have Gällivare and Kiruna, which is way up in the north. And just to give you an idea of how north we are, I woke up this morning to clear blue sky, a bit of dust of snow, and minus 14 degrees Celsius. So we're way up in the north. But it's here that you find the raw materials and the natural resources. So we always have had big industry when it comes to mining, when it comes to forestry, but we also have the hydropower and the wind nowadays, the wind power. So that's why the greening of the industry is located up in the north. So you can change slide, please. Thank you. As I said, my team is located in Skellefteå. We have one person that is up in Luleå, but this concerns the whole of Sweden. The investments that are going to happen in the north of Sweden over the next 15 to 20 years is about 100 billion euros. It's one of the largest investments in history, and definitely nothing that we've seen up here in the north before. So it's going to affect the national economy if it doesn't. If you don't succeed with the skill supply for it, it's going to affect all of Sweden. And it's crucial so that Sweden can reach our goals on climate when it comes to climate, because the industry as it's been is very heavy industry, and it needs to be greener. And the good thing is that most of the companies are up for this. They're like, yeah, we're going to do this, and that's why we have all these investments going on. It's because the companies are like, yeah, we just need to. It's bigger than this, but we just need to tweak a little bit on what we're doing and change some of the things. We can still use the same mines. We just need to change maybe the methods of collecting the iron ore, for example. So it's good to have the companies on our side. It's not that they don't want to do it. Everyone's on board, which is good. So you can, next slide, please. Thank you. What we see is that the industrial green revolution in Sweden leads to societal transformation. These investments in the industry is going to generate about 25,000 new industrial jobs. And you estimate that every job in the industry will give about 3 to 4 other jobs. So in total, we're looking at 100,000 more people working in the region over the next 10 to 15, maybe 20 years. Because if you're going to have a new battery factory, you need the roads, you need people moving in, so you need new schools, you need nurses, so everything that comes around it. And what we also have seen so far is that the skill supply for the green industry is not the main issue. These companies, of course, they need to reskill and upskill the people that are working there. But people are very interested in working in the green industry. It's cool to work in the green industry. You see, they advertise a lot. There's a lot of in media about it. People in the town where I live, they might have worked as a teacher and decided, well, I want to do something else. Well, I'm going to go and work in the battery factory, or one of the other companies that came because of Northvolt establishment in our town. So the biggest problem is the public service sector, and there might not be green jobs there, but they are the biggest challenge to attract new employees to them, because if we don't do that, the industry won't find the right people either, because you don't want to move to a place where the schools doesn't work, where you don't have any restaurants, where the cultural life is boring. So you just want to have, you need the whole society to develop, and that's something that we see now, especially in Skellefteå, where I live, because we're the first. The other towns that we work against, or the municipalities that we have collaborations with, they haven't yet started the I mean, Northwood is up and running. It's a factory that actually makes batteries at the moment. So we are about 5 years ahead of the other towns. And we can see that it's a completely different city that we live in. And there's an enormous challenge to attract people to the public service. Something that's also very interesting, as I said, I've been working at the job centre for a very long time, and we've always been talking about you need to go to university. Finish high school, go to university. That's the way to get a job. But when you look at these 100,000 new jobs, about 80% of them, you don't need more than basic education skills or high school skills. It's only 20% where you actually need to go to uni. So that means that even people that might be unemployed, that might not want to study their academics, a relatively short education can lead to a permanent job. So we see that's really good, because that's going to help us. Because if everyone needed to go to university for 5 years, we would struggle even more than we are at the moment. And as I said, we're no longer talking about shortage of key skills. We're talking about shortage of people. We need to get people to want to take the jobs that are available in the north of Sweden and move. So next slide, please. Yeah, you can click till you get, let's see, what's the last one? It says geographical mobility is the last one. So one more. Yeah, perfect. Thank you. In September 2022, the office where I worked started. The first couple of months, it was just my boss working, and me and my colleagues came. Well, as I said, we're celebrating 1 year tomorrow. We called the PES office for Transition and Action in the North. A very long name, and as I said, we shorten it in Swedish to the PES office Come North. We started because the politicians saw an express need to help municipalities, regions, employers in the north to deal with what was happening in the group because of the greening of the industry. So they decided that we need to have someone that focus on large establishments, because we never done that in the Swedish PES before. We always been working with companies that needed to make people redundant, never when it's come to employing this many people. So we needed to make a change. So they decided that, well, you're going to get your office. There's six people working in this office. We quite often get questions, oh, can we come and see where we're working? Will 2 hours be enough to go through the office and meet everyone? And we're like, there's 6 of us. So we can't do this on our own. We need to find collaborations with companies, municipalities, everyone. And what we working with is that we need to identify activities and, as I said, collaborations to better meet the green transition needs. And that's not only with the company in the industry. We need to talk to the municipalities and the whole full societal transformation or transition, because what's happening up north, people don't understand. Even if I worked with it for a year, I don't think I fully understand what my city is going to be like in 10 years' time. And something that's very, very important is that we need to work on the geographical mobility, both within Sweden and also outside Sweden. So from Europe and maybe even outside Europe. So we have a big challenge ahead of us. So what do we do more hands-on? You can click some more till you get capacity to receive is the last one. One more. Perfect. Thank you. Well, this year that we've now been working has been a lot about giving information, both national and international, because people in general are not aware of what's going on in the north of Sweden, not within the Swedish PES, not within politicians. Everyone needs to know more about it. So we are out and giving speeches quite often. And the good thing is that when we do come out and talk, people are generally really interested and think it's good that they get the information so they can spread it to, if they're going to give career advice, for example, we've been out to talk to people that work with that as well, so they will be able to talk more about where the jobs actually are. And we're also looking into activities to lower the thresholds to help employers who are hiring and also to motivate people to move to the north. So both to look into the employers, well, what can you do? How can you, what do you need to do to attract people from outside your municipality? Because normally, if you get an application from someone that doesn't live in the region where the job is, you go, well, someone's probably, the pest has forced you to go for this job. We're not even going to call you. We're not going to read your CV. So there's a change, a mindset change that we've been working on a lot. And also to move, to motivate people to move north, because there are stereotypical things like, do you have polar bears on the street? Do you always have your snowmobile to take that to work? And try to get people to understand that my life is very similar to the life you live in the south of Sweden. It's just a little bit more chill, both in temperature and that I'm not that stressed. And it's the same with most of the towns where that everything is very near. And it's also very safe up here. So motivate people to move to where the jobs are in the north. We've also been looking at vocational training and how we can make that easier for people to actually study maybe where you live and then do your work experience where the jobs are. Because there's a lot of vocational training in Sweden. You can do it through the PES, you can do it through the municipalities have their own, but it's the financial bit of it that's going to be tricky. You don't get that much money to do it. You get some money to as a student, but it won't help you if you're going to move. If you're grown up wanting to do it and you're going to move your family, you won't survive on the money, the benefits that you get. So therefore, we're looking in and just started where you do your study, the school desk bit of it you do where you live, and then when it's time to do your work experience you come north. So yesterday we had two men or young men from the south of Sweden coming up to Kiruna to work driving tractors and digging, do some ground work. So it's going to be very interesting to see how they get along. And they have another group of people coming in January. They're also very interesting to do that. So they come up for 4 weeks, do the work experience, and then they go back and do the training bit where they live. And we hope that that's going to be something that we can upscale later. We're also looking at the rules and regulations to identify, are there any problems with the regulations that are now? Can we change them? How can we maybe stretch the boundaries of this to make it work to upskill the north of Sweden? And especially me, as I've been working at the PES for such a long time, I find it very interesting to be able to actually say, well, we used to do it like this. Maybe if we just change a little bit, we can get more people in. And have you thought about the fact that, as I said, how much money you get if you're studying if you go into a course that the Swedish PES had told you to do, you don't get very much money. Can you give them more money, or can you hire the benefit when it comes to try to do your work experience somewhere else to get a little bit more for that month that you are away? Sorry. And we're also looking at international collaboration, especially with jurists, and see how they could help us attract people from Europe. And I also think that we're going to have to look outside Europe and see how we can get people from Australia or other countries to come and work in the north of Sweden. But that's a bit more, has more to do with the politicians and what rules and regulations they have about getting people to come to Sweden and work. And an enormous part of our job is talking to the municipalities. How can you receive and welcome new people, both as a city and as an employer? because you might move to get a job, but you're not staying because of a job. Everything around it needs to work. You need to be able to have your kids at school. You need to find somewhere to live, and all that. So that's an ongoing discussion we have with both municipalities and companies to see how can we do make people feel welcome, because otherwise they're just going to fly in and work for a bit and then fly out, or just try to, it's just one person in the family that moves and then the rest of the family stays where you lived before, and that's not the way forward. Next slide, please. As I said, this is just a little bit of information about the team. There's 6 of us in total, but we have about 11,000 colleagues within the public employment service, and we have many close partners. And at the moment, it's nice to say that most people want to collaborate with us. This is something that people want to do. So we are welcome into different groups, invited to a lot of meetings. People want to know what's happening and how we can do this together so that we will be able to make the future greener. And the team consists of different competences. And we have a salesperson who's been working as a salesperson for about 20 years. So she's very good when it comes to actually contacting companies. And then we have some people that are more on the strategic side, who's used to work on a national political arena. And then there's a couple of us that have worked as PES officers for a long time, so we know we have good knowledge of the rules and legislations. So us all together, we're basically doing the same, but we have our special fields, which makes us a good team. And we also, sorry, we hope and we do feel that we have the possibility to affect decision makers when we need to. If we see that we need to do something, we need to change something, we need to upscale something, we need to try new approaches, we have a direct link into the decision makers, and hopefully they will listen to us, and it will go the way that we want, so we can get this 100,000 people moving north, and we will have thriving companies and municipalities. I think I have 2 more slides, so you can take the next one. One more. There you go, thank you. Conclusion so far. We've done a year. First one is that we need to succeed with the skill supply. In general, all the skill supply that are needed in our region, because otherwise the green transition won't be possible, because the green companies won't get people to move here if the road's not working, if we don't have a infrastructure, if we don't have working schools, nurses, as I said. Also, the biggest challenge is the skill supply in the public sector. Not the green jobs, but they are very important for the green jobs to be there. I mentioned this quickly on the last slide, that people need to move to our region. We have quite a lot of fly-in, fly-out workers. In Skellefteå, there has been about 2,000, even up to 5,000, depending on where in the building of the Northvolt have been. But they don't pay tax when they do that. And if we don't have taxpayers living here, we won't be able to do the roads, better hospitals and schools. So we hope that people will like to stay here instead of just fly in, fly out. But it's good to have them to start with, but we need to work with them so we can get them to stay. And that's also very interesting. We've been out to talk to the people that live in the built up like a container village with very tiny apartments, and we've been out to speak to the people there, and they are willing to stay after their contract with the company they work for now finished. They want to stay and live in Sweden, so that's good. When it comes to training courses, they need to be at the right time. Timing is everything. We have started training courses, but the people that did it finished too early for the green companies, so they couldn't hire them straight away. These people got jobs elsewhere, which is good. But then when the green companies need to hire, we stand there, we don't have the right people. So we need to make sure that the timing and the green, when it comes to training courses, are right. We're also seeing that the municipalities need to be able to offer relocation packages, and they do. They can't give you an apartment, but they can show you who do you need to contact to get an apartment. If you want to buy a house, what regions are there, and also to be like a hub for where there need to be someone that you contact, so that can help you with everything from housing to which supermarket should I go to, my son plays football, what team should I contact, and things like that. And they have started doing that. We have welcome houses in all, some sort of welcome house in all 5 of these municipalities. So that's good. And also for the last one is us at the Public Employment Service can't do this alone. We need to do this together with everyone, both in the region, but also all over Sweden. Because if we can't get people to move, we're not going to succeed. Because the unemployment rate in the north is under 4%. In some of these cities that we're talking about, is down to 2.5%, and we're talking about 60 people. So we need to do this together. And then we have one last slide. Perfect. This is the email address if you want to get in contact. You can also email me direct at lina.aldred@arbetsförmedlingen.se. On the webpage, arbetsförmedlingen.se/north, you can translate it into English. It's in Swedish to start with, but it's a little button, so you straight away get it into English. And then we collected all information about the jobs available, about the municipalities, about what we do. There's some links to people who have done the move and see how they think about it. So it's just something, if you're more interested a bit more in what happened up in the north, you can go into that one. And with that, I say thank you. Thanks for listening. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much, Lina. That was fantastic and a great overview of what's happening in Sweden and in particularly in the north of Sweden. I might bring everyone back in now. We've got a few minutes for some questions. I think there are some questions in there. I know Dazan has been answering some of those while Lina's been presenting, so we thank you for that. I think in having a look at some of the chat questions in the chat and also in the Q&A, I think a number of people are asking about, how do you stay on top of the career information, getting the information and so forth. I think there's a few obviously places in Australia, the Your Career website, the Australian government's Your Career website, but also I did put in a chat. So there is a new Careers for Net Zero webpage, which was launched at their fair this week in Melbourne, which Sika was a co-signatory to the joint statement on that particular thing. That website has a lot of information about career opportunities at all levels of education and experience. So I think that website will only continue to grow. So we would encourage you to go to that one. Dazan, I don't know if you've got anything you wanted to add about keeping up to date with sort of, I know one of the things that you spoke about under career guidance was obviously making sure that practitioners have access to up-to-date labour market information in this area, but you also said it's difficult at the moment as well because of the lack of, I suppose, regulation around where we collect this data. But if you wanted to throw anything in, that would be great.
Yeah, I think first of all, just a comment of the review that we did, we found it really impressive, the wealth of information that's available in Australia with different career portals and also the work that Jobs and Skills Australia is doing. So I think there's quite a lot of information on the skills needs in Australia specific. In Australia, you just have to collect and find it. But in terms, I do want to highlight one of the really interesting best practices that we found from Sweden in terms of careers in formal education. And there's a university called University West. So if you look it up in the report, you'll find a little box that explains it, where they are doing something called work integrated learning certification, I think it's called. And the head of every education program has to get together with the local labor market within that same sector in order to ensure that the people who are receiving the graduates are receiving graduates with the right skills. And so they talk across the labor market and the education institution to try and like bridge the gap to ensure that these graduates actually arrive at the labor market with the correct skills. And obviously with the green transition, a lot of that has to do with green skills, but also skills like digital skills and AI. And so that's a really good example of how education institution can take the matters in their own hand and try and ensure that they have the right information about their local labor market. Yeah. I also see that there's a lot of questions in the Q&A about what are the green skills and what are the green knowledges and what are the green tasks. And I think we at the OECD, so I'm working on a report that's going to be published next year, which is going to try and identify and compare this across OECD countries. So June next year, keep your eyes out. But what we have seen so far by comparing the different studies that are covered by our report is that a lot of it, not surprisingly, is technical skills, but also a lot of the skills that are going to be needed are what we call high cognitive skills. So things such as complex problem solving, and persuasion. Persuasion came up in a lot of reports as a big skill because you have to persuade your company to implement all these things that might not be sort of a profit maximizing change, but it's necessary for the green transition. And how do you persuade your company? How do you persuade your clients to do this? So these kind of skills like complex problem solving, persuasion, cooperation, are usually higher among similar occupations that are located in the green sector versus a non-green sector, which I think is really interesting. But more to come on this June next year.
Could be another webinar.
Yeah.
Look, we are running close to time. I think some of the questions that are in the Q&A are quite specific, and I think they've been answered through the course of the discussion. I think you did point to Jobs and Skills Australia's latest clean energy generation report. I've put that link in the chat for people if they're interested in that information. But I would also agree that you know, for our Australian attendees, Jobs and Skills Australia obviously is doing a lot of work in this space as well as we transition to a green economy. So thank you to both of you. Thanks for giving of your time. It's always great to get an international perspective from our friends at the OECD, and it's always wonderful. We've had a couple of presenters over the years from Sweden. It's always nice to have presenters from Sweden. And Lena, thank you so much for giving your time. I know you had some technical issues with computers and iPads and iPhones. I think you've done masterfully well considering that. So thank you very much for that. And Dazana, thank you as always, you know, for your contribution and also the work and the partnership we've got with the OECD around sort of bringing these types of research findings to light. I think it's really, really important. So thank you both. Enjoy your day. To our Australian attendees, enjoy your evening. And for others, wherever you joined us around the world, thanks for joining us this afternoon. I think it's probably the first of, as we transition, you know, more and more into this, I think we're probably going to be having more webinars around sort of green transition as we start to sort of really start to narrow in and focus, and as sort of the impetus starts to take off. And I think, as you said, Lena, all countries are going to be struggling. I think we're all going to be, unfortunately, I think we're all going to be competing for skilled workers and moving to locations as well. I don't think it's unique to the north of Sweden. I think we probably would be the same in Australia as well. We'd be competing for people to move to locations. So, and I'm sure it's the same around the world. So hopefully we can all work together cooperatively as an international body to make sure that we address the issues that we're all going to be facing, and to leave the world in a better place for those generations that are coming behind us. So thank you again, both of you. Thanks everybody for your attendance this evening, and we hope to see you at our final webinar of the year at the end of November. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
so much.
Bye.